Hello. That's very exciting going after the whole interim team, isn't it? Yeah, so I think what they got across is that OME is changing. It's in a period of growth. And this is actually a really great time to be joining OME and getting our ideas heard. And OME is a community, a consortium. So those ideas and this growth has to come from not just the 6 people on top, but from all of us as a community. And when they invited me to speak about my perspective as a community member, it was actually intended to be tomorrow, and then got moved to today. So hello, welcome to OME. But I did want to speak not just as myself, but get the kind of perspective of the full community, or those who were willing to tell me their opinions. So let's get into that. Slight dig at the OME's our logo. Some of you are going to be very happy that I'm doing that. And also we need more pictures. I'm so happy that we're getting pictures. Thank you. Because I only have ones from the last few years. So some of you are probably like, that's great, but who are you? Hi, I'm Kiya Govek. I joined the Jackson Laboratory in 2022 and immediately became the primary admin of a few Omero servers. So that is my primary job. I'm super happy to talk with people about Omero. In particular, I run mine via Kubernetes and do a lot of thinking about smart cloud storage. And recently we converted a lot of our whole slide imaging data to OME ZAR, and had some ideas about that. My first OME community meeting was in 2024 in Dundee. And since then, I helped organize last year's and this year's. And last year at the NGFF Hackathon, I convinced a team of people to join me in a room and revamp the whole NGFF website. So that was a great time. So I've been around. And why am I giving the first talk? I explained the schedule shuffled, but it's a bit of responsibility, right? And the answer is really just I was in the room at the right time when they said we need someone to fill the time, and do you have opinions? And the answer is yes. And I know some people are in the room are going to take this as a warning that if you stick your nose in enough things, you end up with responsibility. But I really do mean it as an encouragement. So I made it into a motivational quote, so that hopefully you can remember that. And also I did a thing. So I posted in March, so last month, a survey on ImageSC asking for community thoughts about the OME community. And I got 40 responses, which is the most responses I've ever gotten to any sort of survey. So thank you all. A lot of you are in this room. And a lot of you actually are watching remotely if you couldn't make that, because I did want also this survey to be a jumping off point for the discussions we'll have this week for people to get their thoughts in if they couldn't be in person for the discussions. A disclaimer, because I'm not a social scientist, I'm not trained in developing and interpreting surveys. This work was done by me, myself, and Jupyter Notebook, with some input from the OMG team for questions that they wanted to ask the community. So some of these questions were definitely things that the OMG team thought were important discussions for us to start having this week. The one main thing that I'm worried about with the survey is the selection bias. All online surveys have the same issue. I posted this on ImageSC, so most of the people it's reaching are on ImageSC or know me personally. And it's mostly the people who have time and dedication enough to OME to fill out such a survey. But I think that also says something about who considers themselves to be part of the OME community, because that is what defines a community, and what can we do to broaden that perspective. So although it has some downsides as a survey template, the purpose isn't really, this isn't a report. I'm not reporting to you on the OME community. I'm starting discussions. And this is a way of getting more opinions in the room to start the discussions. So the first question that I want to talk about from the survey, and it's actually something that some people wrote into the survey, like, I don't know what this means. who is the OME community? What is and who belongs in it? As Josh already said, you are the OME community. If you are here, you're already a part of it, so that's awesome. And perhaps another question is who considers themselves to already be a part of the OME community? Who answered the survey? And there's a little bit of a skew here towards the people who build the code. Yeah, we talk about the products that the OME community comes up with, Omero, Bioformats, and GFF. A lot of these are software driven. So when we're talking about the product of the OME community, we're talking about the code. But there are also valuable members of the community in the users who champion the software, in the builders who make these events happen. The content, I'm one of those. Hi, hello. I like to revamp websites in my free time. And the people who keep the lights on, as Josh was saying. So to me, this graph says some about the percentages in our community, but also about who considers themselves to be part of the community. So I do want to consider that as we're going through this. And sometimes maybe a more difficult question is who is contributors to the community? Because we have these lists on our website. This is the wonderful OME's Our Acknowledgements page made by Tiago. And this list is for OME and Bioformats, maintained mostly by the Dundee team and Glencoe on the OME website. I believe the only requirement of the czar one is that you submit your name to the repo and say, yes, hi, I'm a contributor. And the Dundee one or Glencoe one, I believe, is more actively maintained by y'all. So to some extent, a contributor is someone who says, hi, I'm contributing. And to some extent, it's someone whose name goes on a PR that goes into a repo. So that would be code contributors, but we can expand that definition to people who contribute to organizing events like this, to bringing in funding, to, everything else. So expanding that idea of what is a contributor. And when we think about expanding that idea and making contributing more accessible to the OME community in general, how do we support people in that? Because I was actually quite surprised. Over 80% of the survey said that it is part of their job to engage with the OME community. I was surprised. I thought it would be way lower. However, the main obstacle to contributing is everyone's time and other obligations. Like, we all know this. This is all of our issues. So how can we bring in more people to kind of spread that load? And consistently, this was a write-in question in the survey. I'm obviously not using anyone's explicit words, but general themes were a feeling that it would be helpful to define governance and responsibilities throughout the community. There's already some discussion with the OMG and the ORP projects for making that a little bit more defined and communicated. Aligning on some shared development goals. I know, especially in the czar world, there's a lot of concurrent work going on as things are in and out of sync. And then improving that outreach and communication, both in normal workspaces and daily work between developers and end users, and between developers sharing their projects. Yeah. So now that we've talked about the people of OME, let's talk about the purpose of OME, because as Josh was saying, we started with Omero and Bioformats. I say we, y'all, I've been here for 3 years. But we're expanding, right? Like, NGFF is a big push, and there's a lot of other aspects that come into OME, usually to fix one of the problems that someone's running into in bioimage work. Yeah, a lot of us got into this community not because we said, oh, OME, that sounds cool. It's because we had a problem and we fixed it, and then we ended up here. Yeah. And so the most common problems that people are running into, or at least the people who answered the survey are running into in their work, is a lack of a universal metadata standard. Yeah, some nods in the room. Interoperability between image data management and analysis software, which does link into that kind of universal metadata kind of standard. And then going down the line, this kind of processing of that data, et cetera, et cetera. I was a little surprised actually from my world that securing funding and getting buy-in from leadership were so low, but maybe that says more about who answered the survey. I'm super happy to have questions during the discussions during the coffee hour of, how much does this align with everyone's experience? So when we look at where do these problems correlate with priorities of the OME community, because we have some projects that quite link to some of these problems. What are the current priorities of the OME community? The main ones were specifications and standards, and the OME, NGFF, and ZAR ecosystem and tool development. So that's like active development in OME ZAR. Followed closely by both the Omero and bioformats like support and maintenance, kind of keeping the lights on and keeping those things running for, the continually developing formats, but also active development in the Omero ecosystem as well. Yeah, so directly kind of addressing that interoperability between image data management and analysis softwares, and the idea that we need to be working more towards standards in this universal metadata. And when asked, how are these priorities going to change in the next few years? So we already had 80% of people saying that specs and standards is one of the main priorities, and people think that's going to grow. Yeah, over the next few years, that specifications and standards is going to be one of the main purposes of the OME community in the space of bioimage data management. And that as we mature those specs and standards, it will be easier and more reasonable to do outreach and train other people on them. I know that some of us have had issues going to someone and being like, use OME ZAR, but also it's not in a 1.0 version yet, asterisks. Yeah. So there was some sense on the survey that as these standards mature more, this outreach will become more and more possible. So looking forward, how are we going to do that work? And I'm going to enter a little bit of more code speak now, because this is talking a little bit more about the repositories. I do acknowledge that there's other ways of contributing to the OME system, but we're talking a little bit more about the specs and the tools. And actually, a lot gets done in the OME GitHub repository. So you've got all of the Omero things, from the documentation to the core server to the Docker deployment and other plugins. You've got the main OME web pages on there, the bioformats, all of the NGFF stuff, from the spec to the website to implementations and extensions to other tools. So when I say like code or contributing to the OME repository, yes, it's a lot of code, but it's also the content and the spec and the community. There's a lot going on here. And I asked a question on the survey, which was a bit of a leading question, I suppose, or meant to initiate discussions this week, which is, out of those repositories, the different categories, which ones should be more centrally managed by some sort of OME admin team, asterisk, that admin team doesn't exist yet, and which are more community maintained. And I did get a lot of good write-ins that, oh, maybe all of the repos take community contributions, but have some admin team or the admin team checking reviews. Sure. But there is a pretty consistent trend in our thought process about the different types of repos, about what belongs a little bit more to, say, Glencoe, Dundee, the people who are like paid and actively maintaining this, versus what is a little bit more from the community. Say, if you made a plugin to fix something that was your issue, and now a bunch of people are using it, and hey, it's in the OME ecosystem, but who's responsible for maintaining that? So there's definitely a trend here. And as we talked this week about like the ORPs, the registered projects, we can just discuss a little bit more. What does that mean for the different repositories? And actually, I was really excited by how many people on the survey said, like, yes, I do contribute or would be interested in contributing to OME repositories. Specifically, here's how I would be interested. So about half of the people who said they would be interested in contributing to OME repositories said that triaging issues and doing bug fix PRs was a way that they were interested in contributing. Yeah. About a quarter said documentation or other content writing. And I do recognize like specs doesn't quite fit in that. It's not like the same as documentation, but it didn't really fit in an issue and bug fix. So specifications is its own thing. We'll figure that out. And then another quarter said like actual feature development, tool coding, and such. Yeah. So we have actually got a lot of people who are interested in like helping to keep the lights on triaging issues in our repositories. So how do we enable that? Um, and specifically, what repositories do we want to work first on enabling that in? Like in terms of that graph I showed with like more admin versus more community maintained, where do we start in making this more accessible to the community for triaging, um, and maintaining that? So again, this was somewhat a write-in question, so I'm paraphrasing some things, but again, governance came up a lot in defining who's responsible for reviewing PRs and triaging issues. It doesn't have to be the same, but knowing that train of communication to who you can go to or who is responsible for that is helpful. And then over 50% of those responding said that a major obstacle for them is understanding where the help is needed. So some way of communicating that. I'll be honest, I am not a main maintainer on any of these repos, so I'm super happy to have discussions of what does it mean to contribute where the help is needed on some of these. And again, aligning with those current development goals. Josh already said that we are an ImageSC community. So I have some slides on how do we engage as a community as we like work on getting this work done. And the answer is ImageSC. So 80% of the people responding said that ImageSC is one of their main modes of communication with others in the community. So if you are not already on ImageSC, get on your phone today, go to ImageSC. I did miss out on community calls and hackathons on adding that, but it was a write-in that is an important part of our community. And actually, a lot of the communication happens in the repositories. Yeah. Which I kind of knew, but was good to get reaffirmed that sometimes communication just happens in an issue and like you don't find it on ImageSC. In terms of being here today, I asked people when you go to an OME event or remotely go in some cases, what aspects of events do you get the most out of as beneficial to you? And over 75% of people said presentations was the top thing. No, that was the most common thing for people to say was beneficial to them, which I was a little surprised for though. Like that speaks super well to the presentations, the quality of presentations in the OME community that will be here this week and at other conferences, but actually also the coffee hours and the flex time was the runner-up to most commonly beneficial to people. These discussions that we'll have at the coffee hours and the poster sessions and the dinners. So yeah, make the most of that this week. After that, we had remote community calls. So I know the NGFF calls have become quarterly. Last year, we have other specific community calls for specific topics, but people really finding that like repeated getting in the virtual room with someone being very effective for our community. So with that, how can you get and stay involved in the OME community? Obviously, we've got ImageSC, I mentioned that. I've got the link for the NGFF community calls. Those happen quarterly, but I believe there are more frequent ones for specific working groups and topics that you can find on ImageSC or that link. I'm going to plug Joel's thing, even though he didn't ask me to. So there's another hackathon happening in Zurich in November for the NGFF community. That post is on ImageSC. And one last note is I got here by getting in the room. So motivational poster. Over 50% of the people on the survey said that they would be interested in helping organize a future OME community meeting. That's amazing. That's a lot of people if I'm looking at 50% of this room. So if that's you, please consider getting yourself in the room, volunteering to organize a future community meeting. If community meeting seems too daunting, hackathons, community calls, there's so many ways that the community finds value in engaging, both remotely and in person, that people on the survey were saying, yeah, like we would love more events to meet up. Yeah. And with that, thank you so much, especially to the local organizers who made it possible for me to be here today, and to the 40 responses on my survey. That was amazing. I think I have a very brief time, actually a little bit more time, to have a bit of discussion. Otherwise, we can move on. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. There is, so you have been the first real speaker, so you get the first chocolate, Düsseldorf chocolate, and the famous German bioimaging socks, huh? If you want to be... So. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Well, so we'll all stay here. So open question for the whole session. Yeah. I wanted to say one thing. So this is my first comment from the audience. What Kiya didn't say is that for certainly the last NGFF hackathon and for the last OME meeting, Kiya organized the Let's Get Involved in the OME website and ran that and had tons of people working, or tons, like up to a dozen people like fixing things. And so it was amazing. And so that's why we think Kiya is like this shining example of what can happen if you stick your nose in. So thank you. Okay, be aware of sound because we have so many people online. There are microphones there and there. And I think someone will wave at me if there are things on the chat, right? Who's waving? No? What? Well, you're saying there's nothing. You're not saying, go away, Josh. I'm not going to tell you. Okay. Okay. We didn't work on the hand signals beforehand. Okay. Check.
Okay. When it comes to kind of organizing future events, I'm on the board of SBI2, and we'd be very interested in talking to you guys about coordination of future events. So this year, for the first time, we're having a meeting in Cambridge, UK, in early July. And of course, we have our annual one in Boston every year. So yeah, I think it'd be a great fit. So if I forget, we need to talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk. I mean, that's exactly the type of thing we should talk about this week. What we don't have is like, here's the contact email address for if we want to set something up, but that's kind of what we're doing at the moment. We do have people quite close to you. I mean, I would say talk to Matthew, and so we have developers who are in various places. So if we want to do the low-cost travel things, like Tiago's in Brazil, so if someone wants to do something in South America, we're kind of set up for that. And something bigger to have more of the community going places would be great. There's something in the middle that's a tricky one.
And maybe for the online attendees, you can just repeat the question just once. It's a little bit difficult to hear from the audience.
Even from the mic, okay.
Do you have a sense of the geographical distribution of the OME community?
Oh, interesting. The geographic distribution. We have slides to it. It changes. Kind of everywhere. Give a mic to Jason, please. Oh, that's true.
So the first question back is, well, what do you mean by the OME community? Do you mean people who consume OME resources to the best of our? So when we look at bioformats or IDR or marrow, it more or less approximates the distribution of research of the research community. So that's biased towards the global north, but obviously spread around all sorts of places throughout the world. I would say that the most surprising, to my mind, is to hear what others think. Metric is the usage of the IDR resource, which is truly global. You see IPs from all over the world.
Sounds okay.
But if you look at formats, Amaro is very biased towards where there are research institution protocols.
And certainly the developers, and as you see, the OMG is Eurocentric to a large degree, but I think that's starting to branch out. I mean, you can talk to Katarina if you want to hear about what's happening in the US space, talk to Shuichi if you want to kind of talk about what's happening in the Asian Pacific. You know, it's growing, but clearly starting in Scotland and then taking over the world was the, yeah. Anyone else?
Firstly, huge thanks for running the survey. These things take quite a lot of time, especially now. It's amazing to see. What was the one most surprising thing for you?
Yeah, I think some of these, like what are the priorities of the community and how they are changing? Like, you know, I came from the hosting public data space, like we exist in the same space. And some of these things, like adopting other image softwares, I actually found the legacy site, the legacy open microscopy site in my like researching, and found an old project goals from 2012 that had hosting a public data repo and integrating with other image analysis softwares in its like main 3 project goals. So I was very interested to see that those are much lower on the priority list now compared to like the specs and standards has kind of shifted. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you so much for the survey. That was really amazing. So regarding the people that responded, so 80% developers, and then there was user champions, something like that. I mean, if you think about, yeah, champion users. If we think about, you know, the people that, I mean, I think one of the things that should be a priority, as always, I've always said this, you know, so it's kind of a broken record, but we need to, I think it would be important to increase that number. I mean, you know, obviously, I mean, a little bit biased because it's an image SC and there is still a little bit of a problem. I mean, I consistently speak with users, even people that know about Omero, and everybody is, if they're not developers, they tend to be intimidated. So, I mean, nothing, I mean, this is not to say anything bad about what people are trying, everybody's trying to do everything that they can to make it more welcoming. And so there's nothing wrong with what people are doing, but there is still that. And so we really need to get more users to champion. Then we can, and you know, and people that they raise funds. So, I mean, I think I don't have an answer. I'm just saying, you know, maybe it would be good to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a big thing about the selection bias of the survey is I don't know how much this chart is reflective of the community itself versus the people who are on Image SC chronically. Right. So definitely that's a good discussion to have. Do you want to move on?
I mean, I think, oh, interesting. There's a hole. Anyway. So I mean, we're ahead of time. Amazing. And so, I mean, the talks are the talks, but I mean, Kiya said people like the talks, so that's great. But fundamentally, we could just give you some time to go talk to people. So there is a group photo. Did someone decide where are we doing it?
Front of the house.
Okay, so we're getting ready for the first Lisa Bell, or the second Lisa Bell, sorry. Yeah. And so that's what it sounds like. And so I think it's what we just leave everything here. Everything's safe. It's our building. We've taken over.